Welcome back to Movie Birthdays, the series where I praise my favorite films on their anniversary. I'm sorry it took half a year for this series to come back, but blame release dates, not me. But, in honor of this series' return, we'll go back to a series I touched upon in one of my best videos of 2021. Today, we'll be discussing Toy Story 3. Toy Story 3 came out in 2010 and was directed by Lee Unkrich. In this one, Andy's grown up and is moving off to college soon, leaving the toys with no one to play with. After a misunderstanding, they all decide it's best to be donated to a daycare, except for Woody, who was originally going to be taken to college with Andy. Once at the daycare, they meet the head honcho, Lotso Huggenbear, who assigns them to the Caterpillar room. Soon after, Woody leaves to return to Andy, only to end up in the home of another kid, where he meets other toys and finally gets a taste of being played with again. Meanwhile, Andy's toys learn how relentlessly destructive their room's kids are, which is followed by Buzz getting turned back into a space ranger again. Lotso reveals his true colors, the toys get locked up, Woody comes back for them, and it becomes a daring escape to get back home to Andy in time. Right off the bat, Toy Story 3 is a great sequel for continuing the themes and ideas of the last film, such as finding a different path to take when your owner grows old, as well as new concepts like ending up in a daycare, which has a plentiful amount of young kids just waiting to play with you. It's wonderful. Up to that point, this was the darkest film in the series by a big margin, and unsurprisingly, I love every bit of it. From the eerie music to how disturbing the villains can be to the jump scares? And God, need I even mention that traumatizing ending? Once Lotso betrays them, the group falls into the pit of fire! They desperately try to climb their way out, but it's no use. They eventually come to the realization that they're going to die, and instead of trying to prevent the inevitable or perish in fear, they grab each other's hands, living their final moments with each other.
We're a family. We stay together.
And having Buzz be the one to hold his arms out first, and Woody to grab hold last, and with that score and everyone shutting their eyes, oh my god, it gets me choked up. Even though I just knew as a kid that they were gonna survive somehow. Which they do, of course, and in the most surprising yet fitting way possible. What a climax. I really like how the opening sequence is a callback to the first film's intro. One thing that's a tad disheartening is how our Buzz is hardly in the film, only getting a few scenes to connect with the others. And while strict and Spanish Buzz can still be quite threatening and or humorous, they pale in comparison to the godsend of Part 2's Space Ranger Buzz, which reminds me that this movie, while obviously not as gut-busting as past installments, can still make me laugh hard.
Oh, give it up. No one can hear you. What? I said no one can hear you.
What? He said no one can
But oh no, this movie's got girls' toy jokes and stuff. Oh, how sexist, blah blah blah, I don't care. This movie's 12 years old, expect that kind of stuff. Nice job forcing me to think of that every time I rewatch this, dippies. Anyways, Prison Break movies can be a blast, but Toy Story 3 is a whole other beast. It's not only really interesting to see the toys traverse such a unique environment, but to see them escape a location that we probably wouldn't view as a prison is really fun and original. It just makes this installment all the more unique. All the sleuthing around itself is still a lot of fun, and I cannot even begin to tell you just how many times I'd imagine Woody sneaking through an environment around me as a kid. Weirdly enough, I just love all the toddler carnage and chaos in the Caterpillar room. I don't know why. Maybe it's the slight fisheye lens or the horrific twist on it all. As expected, everyone is still very much in character, and now with the main cast being reduced to the most recognizable ones, other than Bo Peep who was only cut because she would have melted in the fire scene, everybody gets a chance to really shine. Also, just like before, I love all the new characters. Barbie is a really fitting and memorable inclusion, alongside Ken, who is voiced by Michael Keaton, by the way.
How do you think your buddy Stark paid for that tower? Or any of his little toys?
Lotso's henchmen are pretty fun.
He ain't the sharpest knife in the places where they keep the knives.
Neither are you, chunk.
Of course, how can you not love Big Baby? That moment where he misses Daisy, only to get shoved and yelled at by Lotso? Oh my gosh. So satisfying to see him go all Return of the Jedi on Lotso. Bonnie herself is a crucial and delightful addition to the movie, and the whole idea of her being the toy's next owner in general just feels like the correct step for evolving the story, which was already an established concept in the last movie. So nice.
Somebody's poisoned a water hole!
Poison? Ah! The scary witch!
And then there's her toys. Mr. Pricklepants, Buttercup, etc. are way more charming than I remembered. And last but not least, Lotso Hugginbear, voiced by the late Ned Beatty, one of the most intimidating and impactful villains of the Pixar library. There's so much to be said about this guy. Firstly, I appreciate that his intents are revealed pretty early on. It would have been too predictable if they just had him as a kind old bear through most of the runtime, only to pull the rug at the very end. Instead, we get tricked at the beginning and then have a disturbing villain for the rest of the adventure. Plus, we're told the backstory after the reveal, not only explaining how he ended up this way, but making him appear far more sinister in the following scenes. And dang, that betrayal right at the end when you think he's softened up a bit after being saved? Urgh! And need I mention that he left an impact beyond his presence? You know how he kept saying,
What are y'all doing? Running back to your kid? He don't want you no more.
While that statement isn't really true, it does get Woody thinking about the idea of finding someone else who will continue to play with them, which does pay off in the end. Quite the impactful baddie. The animation speaks for itself, but hot dang, 12 years later and this movie still looks good. I want to say that this was the first Pixar movie to nail that mega detailed, perfectly rendered style we're so used to seeing now. The landscapes and character designs are extensively intricate, all the movement is so smooth, and let's just say that the work done with getting the trash bags to look right, remodeling the old characters, and creating new ones was worth it. Not to mention how vibrant the color palette is, which complements the childish setting and clashes with the darker imagery perfectly. This movie's also got great continuity, like the stitches on Woody's arms still being present from Toy Story 2, or more obvious, the height marks on Andy's door from earlier. The score is great and "We belong together" always makes me bob my head while simultaneously reminding me of the sad truth. Going into this the first time, I didn't even know that everyone else was sold off. The realization that Etch, RC, Wheezy, Lenny, Bo Peep, etc. were all just gone smashed me like a ton of bricks. Oh, and as for the whole Slinky Magnet thing, it's obvious that the group just held on to him and brought him down to the ground. Simple as that. And as we all know, it's so perfect that Andy's ageness is in line with those who grew up with the other films, intentional or not. Now how about some fun facts? This was the first Pixar movie released in IMAX, the first film to be made in Dolby Surround 7.1, the first animated film to reach $1 billion globally, and the highest grossing animated film of its time. Wow. The version of this film that I got was from a friend of ours, but it was international. The dialogue was in English, but all the text was in Russian. And now it's so weird for me rewatching some of these scenes with normal English lettering everywhere. Oh, and there's your by and large, A113, Pizza Planet Truck, Luxo Ball, and surprisingly even Sid.
It seems today that all you see is violence in movies and sex on TV.
Toy Story 3 is truly wonderful. Like many Pixar movies, I appreciate it far more as an adult than as a child. But Part 3 in particular hits me hard now, as both a person who still holds on to his toys, and as someone who's the same age as Andy and will potentially move on to college in the near future. I clearly liked it as a kid, but I usually preferred to rewatch the more light-hearted previous films. And even with that, it's still an original, suspenseful, funny, thematically satisfying experience. It's one of the company's greatest sequels and just movies in general, and I cannot recommend it enough to anyone, young kid or adult, or at least those who somehow still haven't seen it. While it might no longer be the wonderful conclusion we once thought it was, it's still a spectacular movie and a great ending to the classic Pixar catalog. I'm so glad that it exists, and that I discussed it just in time for the release of Lightyear. I'll check out the fourth one someday, I promise. Happy anniversary, Toy Story 3, and as always, thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.